Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new Texans Jacob video. Today, we're going to kind of get on here and talk about one of the more interesting things for the Rockets this offseason, which is the Cam Whitmore situation. Whitmore's been kind of a rumored guy that could be on the move here coming up, probably before June 6th, as the Rockets, kind of finalize their roster. And, Cam is a guy that the Rockets drafted when he slipped a couple years ago due to some, different issues in college, like injuries or, maybe not buying into system, which we'll get into. But Cam Whitmore, was a guy that I think a lot of people had high hopes for, but he really hasn't lived up to it. He kind of played his way out of the rotation last year and then wasn't able to work his way back in, which I know he was not happy about. But, you know, I think there's a lot to get into in this situation because I think it's a very tough one to kind of decipher. And I will give my thoughts, and y'all can leave your thoughts in the comments. So, getting into the Cam Whitmore situation, Whitmore has been a guy that was originally kind of part of the Phoenix Suns deal, according to some reports. He was a guy that, the Rockets were willing to offer to Phoenix, but Phoenix decided to take 5 seconds instead. And, it worked out well for them. They got Rasheer Fleming out of it. But, the Rockets have shown willingness to move off of Cam Whitmore, and I don't think that's going to change moving forward. And it seems like the Rockets are inclined to move him before the June 6th date, which, I know there's kind of some different opinions out there, but I'm going to say, just lay it out there right now. I think the correct move is to move off of Cam Whitmore. And while I think there's some upside with Cam Whitmore for sure, I just don't see him being a winning and productive basketball player, a role guy on a good winning team. I don't see him doing that next season. He hasn't done that in his first 2 years. The Rockets have really been better when he's been out of the rotation. When he gets into the rotation due to injuries or other things, the Rockets actually, the Rockets usually play a lot worse due to that. And he's a bad passer. He's a bad defender. He can score, but that's about all he can bring. But he takes a lot of bad shots. There's a lot of things that you can debate about Cam Whitmore. But my thoughts as a whole is I think the Rockets would be in the correct mindset to try to move off of him for probably some future seconds and to reload their seconds after losing a lot of them in the Kevin Durant deal. The Rockets did give it 5 seconds, and while seconds used to not be all that valuable, they've definitely gained value the last couple of years. And for the Rockets to could look to add a guard or something near the deadline, the seconds would be very valuable in that sense. So I think it is. I think it's a correct move to look to move him along with obviously Jack Landale, who's going to get waived. But I have some graphics to show. As to kind of why I think the Rockets should move off of Cam Whitmore. Obviously, I'm playing some highlights here, but these are some of the ideas. These are some of the graphics that you could go to show for Cam Whitmore. So Cam Whitmore, when he was on, the Rockets had a 0.75 net rating, and while here, let's try this. Okay. Oh no, let's go back. Let's go back. So they had a zero point 0.5 net rating. They got 4 points worse defensively, and they were a worse offensive team as well. And in the 3,000 minutes that he didn't play last year, they were a +5. So the Rockets were better when he was off the floor instead of when he was on. And then if you look at the one with Amen Thompson, which I should be able to, there we go, I can maximize it. The Rockets were a -2 when he was on without Cam, or when Cam Whitmore was on without Amen Thompson, and when Amen was on without Cam Whitmore, they were a +6. So the Rockets really fell apart defensively, especially if you look, there's a 6 point difference. So Cam Whitmore is a bad team defender. Like, that is the reality of the situation. He doesn't defend well. He didn't defend really any position well. He's very bad off the ball. He will lose shooters very consistently or get backdoored a lot. So, that's an issue for Cam Whitmore. It's really a thing about him buying in, and we haven't seen a lot of him buying in so far in his career. It just hasn't happened. And, for him to play a role, he's got to buy in defensively, and he's got to buy in, on the offensive end when he doesn't have the ball in his hands. He's got to take smart shots. He's got to play within the offense. And there's been very little to suggest that Cam Whitmore is willing to do that throughout his career. Here's some more advanced stats. He really has been a negative defensively, and he really has not been a huge plus offensively. He's been solid offensively throughout his career, especially in his first year. He definitely had a better offensive season that year, but he really hasn't shown this ability that, like, oh, he's going to go get you 25 a night or something like that. And defensively, again, he's been a liability. So I think there's some rebuilding teams that would probably take shots on him for some second round picks because there is scoring upside there. And, whether or not he succeeds in that situation, he can score the ball and he can be a fun player for, a team that is not going to win a lot of games, but just wants to be exciting. Like, he can fit that type of mold. He's very athletic. He can score a lot of different ways. So that type of idea. And, I'm sure Whitmore would be happy about that. He really has not enjoyed his role here. And I think that's part of the reason why the Rockets are looking to deal him. I think the Rockets would be cool with keeping him as like a 9 or 10th man, but Cam doesn't want that. And, we're going to see that kind of be an issue for Cam moving forward. So I don't really think there is a whole lot of reasons to keep Cam Whitmore. I think there are some things that makes Cam Whitmore an intriguing prospect, like I said, but for a team that's winning and a team that really is not going to use him all that much, I don't. I think you'd rather have the second round picks for a future type move like that. And really, Cam Whitmore is just not a guy that Ime Udoka likes very much, and not that there's not reason for that. He doesn't play Cam Whitmore because Cam Whitmore will not buy into his role, and that is completely fair. And I agree with Ime Udoka on this. But I think there are some issues when it comes to, like I said, defensively and just taking poor shots that are not within the offense. And the Rockets really, like, you look at it, and he probably would have to play this guard role, but I don't really think he can play guard because there's very little to show that he can pass the basketball at a high level. He hasn't, or even at an average level, he hasn't shown that he can. Okay, I'm driving. I got two guys on me, and I'm going to kick it out. There's been very little to prove that Cam Whitmore is willing to do that, and he wants to try to finish around all these defenders, and that just isn't a good recipe for success. The Rockets, like I said, have been better without Cam Whitmore. He is one of two guys last year that for the Rockets that had a negative net rating that are still on the team between him and Reed Shepard. And Reed Shepard is a guy that really is a guy that you expect to take a leap this season. He struggled somewhat last year, but you definitely think he can take a leap. He's a smart basketball player. He is a good shooter. There's a lot of reasons to suggest he's also a good defender. There's a lot of things to suggest that Reed Shepard can be a plus next season. But the other two, that were on the Rockets last year that had a negative net rating were Dylan Brooks and Jalen Green, who are both out. They're both out of the job. They're not here anymore. So there's a lot of reasons to suggest that the Rockets like net rating and kind of use that as a stat to kind of you know add guys. Dorian Finney-Smith is one of the better net rating guys in the league who the Rockets just added. So there's a lot to suggest that okay, they're going to move forward using some of these advanced stats and be a good basketball team off of that because usually those stats don't lie to you over a big sample size. Um, I think Cam Whitmore, like I said, he's got upside. The Rockets just really don't have time to put up with. Okay, well, he's not going to buy into a role. They don't have time to put up with that. They're trying to win a championship this season, and I don't. I think he'd be an issue, honestly, getting rotational minutes in a playoff setting. I think he would struggle really bad defensively. He would take some really poor shots in bad situations and really play you out of games because the way that he plays is detrimental when he's not scoring 30 plus. He really doesn't do much else when he's not making shots. He really will kill team. He will kill your momentum or anything if he's not making shots, and that's just not something that you can really have. And the Rockets, had a guy like that, which was Jalen Green, and he got shipped out. But even Jalen Green was a better defender than Cam Whitmore. He's a better passer marginally, but he was a better passer than Cam Whitmore. So there's just not a lot to suggest that the Rockets like this type of player anymore. And I think in the past they did, but he really does not fit what Ime Udoka wants to do here. And I think he will be moved by July 6th or coming up here soon. So I think there's a lot to be excited about for the Rockets, but I think this is one where he's probably going to be out of a job here pretty soon. And I wish him the best no matter where he ends up. But I think it's best for both sides to just go ahead and move on. But I appreciate everyone for watching. Going to do a lot more Texans content coming up as well with training camp coming soon, and a lot to be excited about with the Rocket season also coming up. So make sure y'all like, subscribe, and we will see y'all next time.